So we've got a number of people in the queue right now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Great. Well, hey, I want to, my name is Brian Yates. I'm the 2020 president-elect for the Tri-County Association of Realtors and the chair for the Global Business Council. I want to introduce our 2020 president, Mary Harmon. Is she with us today?
No, not
Okay,
yet.
so she wasn't able to make it here, but I also want to thank everybody who registered for this event. I know that some of you have come from other associations around, so thank you for joining us. We really look forward to your input as well. We hope to give you some real takeaways from today and that you can grow your international business. Before I introduce our speakers, I just want to tell you about an exciting announcement that we have. On June 8th, Tri-Counties launched our first real estate podcast. We call it the Tri-Co Tidbits. It's a new episode that releases every Monday, and they're short educational episodes on what's happening in our industry. So I do want to encourage you to go to our website and check those out. Again, the website is tricorealtors.com. Again, that's a new episode every Monday, so put that on your calendar. I also want to encourage you to go and listen to those podcasts and know that we have a calendar on the website. Right now, there are a lot of our classes that are free to you. The great thing is right now you can take advantage of those either during that time. Some of them we're even recording and may be available to you at another time, but please take advantage of those recorded or those webinars. Again, they're scheduled and also many of them are free. I can tell you even the ones that are paid are more than worth the small cost. Lastly, I want to encourage you to get involved with Tri-Counties. We have several committees. And I want you to know that the commitment there is very small. Usually we're meeting as little as once a quarter, maybe up to 6 times depending on the committee, but very rewarding, and we'd love to have you a part of that. If you want to, please give me a call. My number, by the way, is area code 626-610-5777. Love to have you call and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. So I want to answer or introduce our first speaker, who is Victoria Kajo. Ms. Kajo is Senior Counsel in Los Angeles office of Gordon and Reese. She has extensive experience with professional litigation, having defended lawyers, design professionals, and real estate professionals against claims from alleged negligent acts and omissions in the performance of their professional services. So hopefully we don't have to call on your services, but we really excited to have you here. In the area of immigration law, Ms. Kajo has prepared multiple immigration petitions, including family-based adjustments of status petitions, consular processing, asylum petitions, among others. She has also handled immigration appeals before the United States Court of Appeals before the Ninth Circuit, and she graduated from J. Reuben Clark Law School at Brigham Young University with an LLM, which is Master's in Law and Comparative Law, in 2008. She was admitted to the California Bar in 2009, the United States District Court, Central District of California in 2012, and the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in 2012. Ms. Kajo will do her presentation and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. We're so excited to have you here, Victoria. Please take it away, and you've got around 30 minutes, but certainly we'll be flexible on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. I am very honored to be here today to share some of my immigration knowledge with you. When Laura reached out to me, she asked me to talk about recent developments in US immigration law. And because of my background with real estate professionals, I have titled my presentation, Recent Developments in US Immigration Law and the Real Estate Industry. Immigration law in the United States is very extensive. It's very broad. It's very impossible to be able to talk about all of it in 30 minutes or even in a day. So what I've done is I have tried to narrow it to talk about some of the hot topics that we're having right now, and also to talk about some of the things I believe real estate professionals should know about with regards to immigration. So I will share my screen. All right. So as an overview, we're going to be talking about work visas, immigrant and non-immigrant visas, and the recent developments that affect those, the EB-5 program, and the Trump administration's travel ban. When we talk about work visas, there are temporary non-immigrant visas and permanent immigrant visas. With regards to the temporary visas, we have the EHL, OP, QR, and TN visas. Now, I know that that doesn't really make any sense, but immigration law in the United States is governed by the Immigration and Nationalities Act. And these alphabets refer to where the sections are found. For example, the E visas, it's section E of the Nationality Code that talks about those kinds of visas. So I'm going to just briefly talk about some of them. E visas, we have E1s, E2s, E2C, and E3 visas. These visas have to do with treaty traders and their qualified employees. And they also have to do with certain specialty occupations. And if you want a more detail on the e-visas, you can always go to the United States travel.state.gov website. But I think what is important to note is these are visas that have to do with countries that the United States has treaties with. So there are certain treaties that the United States have entered into with certain countries that allow citizens of those countries to come into the United States and work on a temporal basis. So people who are trying to get visas to come to the US and work on this temporal basis would be issued an e-visa to come and work temporarily. The H visas have to do with, there's the H-1B visa, which is the most popular one. And the H-1B is a lottery kind of visa. Right now in the United States, there are 85,000 visas that are allotted for the H-1Bs. It is a very specialized kind of visas that are targeted towards people who have certain educational limits. You have to have at least the equivalent of a US bachelor's degree to be able to apply for an H visa. It is also important to know that there is a time cap for filing H-1B visas. Usually these visas are opened up on the 1st of April of every year. These visas have to be sponsored by US employers. So a US employer who wants to hire a foreign worker would sponsor them for the H-1B visas. Those who have master's degree are subject to, there are 20,000 visas that are reserved specifically for master's degree holders. But again, the important thing to know is that you as employers sponsor people, so you can't sponsor yourself for an H-1B visa. And then there are the O visas. These are visas that are reserved for people who have extraordinary ability. Like you have to pretty much be, the best of the best in your field to be able to qualify for an O visa. And then the other temporary visas are the R visas. These are visas that are reserved for religious workers. The reason this is important is the R visas are not very widely known. So if you have a client who wants to come to the United States to work on a temporary basis, they can have their church or mosque or religious organization sponsor them for the R visas. Now, what is important to know about and then with regards to the permanent immigrant visas, These visas are the ones that allow people to not just come for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. They can come and live and work in the United States permanently. There are different categories of these visas. You have the first preference, second preference, third, fourth, and fifth preferences. With regards to the EB1, first preference theory, visas, one of the most important things to know about the first preference visas are that they are reserved for people of extraordinary ability, but people with the E1 visas can petition themselves. These people do not need someone else to petition for them. Because of their high skill, they can petition themselves to be able to live and work in the United States permanently. These are visas that are reserved for outstanding professors and researchers, and also for multinational managers and executives. The professors and researchers are classified under EB1-2 and EB1-3. But these visas, the EB1-2s and EB1-3s cannot self-petition. They would need a US employer to petition for them. Now, the EB2s and EB3s, these are second and third preferences. Again, they're reserved for people who have extraordinary ability, but these are for people who have advanced degrees in their field, and also skilled workers. These visas are the ones I spoke about before, like the H-1B. The difference between an EB2 and an H-1B visa is that the H-1B is a temporal visa. It's issued for 3 years, renewable for another 3 years, and then renewable for 1 year, so a total of 7 years. But you can move from the H-1B visa to a permanent visa to get a green card. And to be able to do that, you would either have to petition for an EB2 or an EB3 visa. So that's the difference. They're very similar, but they're different in that one is temporal and the other one is permanent. And then we have the fourth preference visas. These are visas that are reserved for certain religious workers, employees of US Foreign Service posts, retired employees of international organizations, and alien minors who are wards of courts in the United States. Now, the difference between the religious visa that we talked about and the EB4 preference is exactly the same as the difference I talked about before. While the religious preference visas are temporary, the EB4 visas are permanent. So you start out with a temporary visa and then you petition, for a more permanent visa. Now, the one thing I wanted to talk about is with regards to these work visas that we have discussed extensively. It is very important to know that just 2 days ago, on June 22nd, 2020, President Donald Trump issued Presidential Proclamation 10014 that basically suspends the issuance of all of these visas to the end of the year. So nobody can get a work visa to come to the United States for the rest of 2020. Why this is important is there are certain people that are exempted from this. Those who are affected are persons that are outside the United States on the effective date of the proclamation. And the effective date is actually today, June 24th. So this presidential proclamation takes effect today. So anybody who does not currently hold an H-1B visa or any of these other work visas will not be issued one throughout the end of the year. And then persons who do not have any kind of valid immigrant visa on the effective date, which is today, will not be issued any of these work visas. The following categories are exempted from the proclamation: lawful permanent residents. So people who have a green card are not affected, whether or not they're in the United States or out of the United States. And then individuals and their spouses who are seeking to come into the United States to work to combat COVID-19. So health workers who are trying to get special kinds of visas to come and help fight the coronavirus will also be issued visas. There will not be, their visas are not suspended. And most importantly, individuals who are applying for a visa to enter the United States pursuant to the EB-5 program are also exempted. And we're going to talk about EB-5 in a little bit. Now, spouses of US citizens, children of US citizens under the ages of 21, individuals who would further important US law enforcement, members of the US Armed Forces and their spouses and children, individuals and their spouses or children who are eligible for special immigrant visas. For example, Afghan or Iraqi translators. So there's special visas that are issued to people who are helping our forces, fight in Afghanistan. Those visas have not been suspended. And all individuals whose entry would be in the national interest, their visas have also not been suspended. Now, why is this important to know? You might have certain clients who are trying to come into the United States to buy property for maybe vacation purposes, or they're trying to come into the United States and hoping that they can, get one of these work visas, or they're trying to buy property, hoping that they would be here for certain years. If those visas have not already been issued, they will not be issued unless they fall into one of these exempted groups. So I think that that's very important for realtors to know. There is also DACA. I'm sure many of us have heard about DACA. DACA is basically an acronym for the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. Now, there are some 70,000 young people who were brought into the United States as children, and they are without proper documentation because they were not born here, and they've not been able to adjust their status to either become lawful permanent residents or citizens. There are many, many of them. On June 15, 2012, the Obama administration set in place the DACA program that protects such people from being deported from the United States. Basically, what DACA does is it allows these people to apply for a 2-year renewable work authorization document, but DACA does not give them a path to citizenship. It just protects them from being deported. In 2017, the Trump administration ended the DACA program. This was met with widespread harsh criticism, and basically the Trump administration was sued over this. On September 25, 2017, the New York Times published an article that showed that 86% of Americans support DACA and those who benefit from it. These people are often referred to as dreamers. Since the lawsuits have been making their way through the court system, first from the district court, then to the Court of Appeal, and then to the Supreme Court. Interesting and very important for us to note is that on June 18th, which is just about a week ago today, the US Supreme Court finally issued a decision entitled, in a case entitled Department of Homeland Security versus Regents of the University of California. And that decision basically handed a huge victory to DACA recipients, which allows them to temporarily stay in the United States. Now, what is important to note about this decision is that even though it was issued by the United States Supreme Court, the decision did not examine whether or not DACA was constitutional or not, but whether ending DACA was properly or improperly done. Now, this is important because the US Supreme Court basically, as Justice Alito put it, allows the Trump administration to try again. Usually when the Supreme Court issues a decision, it becomes law. And if they say, okay, you're wrong, you can't do that, you basically cannot do it. But this decision says the way it was done was not proper. So the Trump administration can try again to end the DACA program. So this is just a temporary relief. A permanent solution can only be found in Congress passing legislation to that effect, or, if the US Supreme, if the Trump administration doesn't try again. But for now, the Trump administration can again try to end DACA. Now, the reason I thought that DACA was important is because Like I said, there's at least 70,000 people who are beneficiaries of the DACA program. Many of them were brought here as children. Many of them have jobs. Many of them are contributing to the society. Many of them would probably want to buy homes. Now, traditional banks will not lend to DACA recipients because most of them don't have social security numbers, but it is important for real estate professionals to know that there are certain banks that lend exclusively or at least tailor most of their lending towards DACA recipients. So it is not a lost cause if one of your clients is a DACA recipient and does not have proper documentation. As long as they have the DACA, they could be able to buy homes. There are banks that lend exclusively to people of the Latino and Latina origin, and they know that most of these people are here, they've lived here for many years, this is the only country that they know, and they require certain documentation, which if provided, would be able to show that they've been here for that amount of time, and they would be able to lend to them to buy homes. So I thought that was very important for real estate professionals to know. There's not a lost cause that they're not citizens or green card holders. There are banks that would lend to them. And finally, I wanted to talk about the EB-5 program. I think that EB-5 is, it's a very important program that basically it's an investor-based program. This is a program that allows very wealthy people to invest sums of money into the United States economy and be able to get papers to be able to live here. So they can get green cards or permanent residences, and that could also lead to citizenship in the United States. Initially, the EB-5 program was tailored towards the limits where you could invest $1 million or 500,000 US if you were in a targeted employment area. But recently, the Trump administration raised those amounts. So now if you have a client who has at least 1.8 million, they can invest that in the United States economy. And there are other criteria, but then if they're investing in one of the areas called TEA, which is a targeted employment areas, they only have to have 900,000 US dollars. Now, some of the criteria to be able to qualify for this is you have to provide at least 10 US workers with jobs. You also have to have experience, it has to be, if you're looking at the TAE areas, it has to be an area that is specially designated for that purpose. Now, in the EB-5, there are a lot of companies that can help you if you don't know what you want to invest your money in. There are companies that have huge projects, real estate, hospitals, education, and these companies can actually help your clients to invest their monies so that your client's not actually doing it. Now, the EB-5 program, this is a good timeline of the program. It usually takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months to be able to finalize. So within the first 1 to 2 months, you collect documents from your clients and then you file it. It takes between 21 to 24 months for USCIS to approve it. And then after that, the investor has to file the application to remove conditions. And after the conditions are removed, then they can either apply for US citizenship, but that's after a period of 5 years. Now, there are some questions that people ask about the EB-5 program. I'm investing all this money, what's the rate of return? Unfortunately, the rate of return is always very, very small. The point of the EB-5 program is not to multiply your money or help you get a lot of money. The point is to help you gain permanent residency and potentially citizenship in the United States. So it's important to let your clients who are interested in this program know that the investment's not going to return a lot of money. Now, before we talk about the travel ban, again, with regards to the EB-5 fifth preference, this has not been suspended. The recent presidential proclamation, which goes into effect today, does not affect the EB-5 program. So if you have very wealthy people who are interested in investing in the United States to get either green cards or citizenship, they can still continue to do that. Now, why is it important to know about the immigration status of your client before, as a real estate agent? It's important because, number one, like I said, there are certain non-citizens and non-green card holders who will not get regular financing. They will not have a regular bank loan to them. If you know about your client's special immigration situation, for example, the DACA, then you can properly direct them to the lender that would help them, unless of course they have all cash. You know, with regards to all cash purchases, you know, we don't really care what your immigration status is. If you have all cash and you don't need a lender, then you know the immigration status is not really important. And then there's also issues associated with fraud and the risk to real estate agents. I think that this is very, very important because there have been cases where people who do not have proper documentation try to get people who do have proper documentation to buy properties under their names for them. Typically, this is real estate fraud. And it's actually very common. And there have been cases where, you know, at the end of the day, the realtor gets dragged into the lawsuit that is filed. Fraud is something that you want to stay away from because, number one, most errors and omissions insurances specifically exclude fraud. So if a judgment is found against you and your insurance doesn't cover it, that's going to come out of your pocket. So it's very important to not be involved in any kinds of fraud. And in this case that I cited here, in a Mountain Mortgage versus Suleiman, the trial court found that with regards to fraud, the trial court found the trial court erred in granting summary judgment as to the cause of action for fraud because there was an abundance of evidence that the defendant loan representative was acting within the scope of employment when he committed the alleged fraud. Now, the reason I bring that up is because not only are you putting yourself at trouble, you're in trouble, you might also drag your broker into, you know, a case that has to do with fraud, which is something that, you know, you don't want to do. And then in Fleet versus Bank of America, this is a decision that holds that an agent or employee is always liable for his or her own torts. So a fraud in real estate is a tort, and it's important for a realtor to try to stay away from this as much as possible. So I bring those up for us to basically point and direct the point that immigration status is very important in real estate transactions. Ask your clients early about it so that you know how best to direct them, how best to help them, so that if you need to get an immigration attorney involved, you know what to do early on so that you're not spending all of this time and then at the end of the day, you know, you've wasted your time because the deal cannot go through. Finally, I know that I'm almost out of time, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the travel bans. These are still very, very much in place. Many of us are aware that President Trump has basically put in place certain travel bans that prohibit citizens of certain countries from coming into the United States. Now, the countries that are currently affected are Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. Citizens of those countries are not allowed under the travel ban to come and live here. And the most recent ban, President Trump added several countries to the travel ban. And the nationals of those expanded travel ban are citizens of Burma, Eritrea, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Sudan, and Tanzania. What is important to know about these travel bans is that it only prohibits immigrant visas, okay? We talked at the beginning about the difference between immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas. Now, this doesn't mean that citizens of these countries under the expanded travel ban cannot travel here temporarily. They can, but they cannot come here as immigrants to come and live in the United States. Why is this important? You need to be able to advise your clients who, say for example, you have a client from Sudan who is very wealthy and wants to do the EB-5 program. You need to be able to advise them that, look, their visa is not going to be approved despite the fact that they have all this money because their country is on the list that is banned from being granted an immigrant visa. So very important to know about this thing so that you can properly advise your clients. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Okay, we don't have any questions yet. If anybody has any questions, they can put it in the chat box. Let's see, somebody's raised their hand. Let's see. People are asking for the slides. Now we are recording this and I will be putting it on the Tri-County's website, so you will be able to see it in the future. Okay. And I think that's it.
Okay, I actually have a question for her. I mean, you know, this is an area that certainly is extremely important. I think we know we had quite a period of time that we had a lot of our foreign buyers were coming from China, and then we saw where this was affected, say on EB-5, et cetera. But I mean, Victoria, where do you see, as you're working with your clients and so forth, is there, and especially we're looking at the politics of things going on in an election year, are there things that we need to see that are drastically going to be changing here, or what do you, it's your crystal ball, what do you kind of see might be happening moving forward that could be either opening it up or maybe constricting these opportunities?
Thank you for that question. I think that immigration is a very hot topic and has been in every election. I think that President Trump is very, you know, anti-immigration. He hasn't hidden that as his position. And I think that Vice President Biden is very pro-immigration. In fact, he said that on day one, if he's elected, he's going to send a bill to Congress that would permanently protect DACA recipients. And with regards to how to answer your question, I don't think it is possible for anyone to actually really have a crystal ball. I think it depends on who wins the election. And I think it depends on what policies are put in effect. One thing I can tell you though is that the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, and other pro-immigration groups are seriously fighting President Trump on some of this, you know, anti-immigration policies. And there are lots of lawsuits that we anticipate being filed with regards to this recent proclamation. For example, immediately it was announced, AILA issued a statement rejecting it in its entirety, and they're not the only ones. And I think that there are a lot of US citizens who have family members who are not in the country and want to be able to bring their family members into the country. And even though, you know, the proclamation excludes them, you know, with regards to the travel bans, for example, those people are not excluded. And so, like I said, there is no crystal ball. It depends on how the elections go, depends on what the courts rule. But one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that, you know, immigration lawyers and immigration groups are not going to stop fighting for immigration rights.
Good. I don't know if I can ask this. I didn't see a slide that maybe had your contact information, but I would say that what I'm hearing you say with all the fraud and everything else is we need to be really careful. We're not experts, obviously, in immigration. Even for those on the call or on this Zoom who have more familiarity and everything, I just want to encourage that, like with everything, if we sit down with a title rep or we sit down with an escrow officer, we sit down with other experts, inspectors, I definitely would say, and this is my question to you, is if any of the viewers wanted to get together with you so that we could understand more fully, not that we're going to be counsel to our clients, but rather how can we work with you or others like you who we want to be able to make the process much smoother and also demonstrate to our clients that we know, have a familiarity in a comfortable position in that process.
Yes, thank you very much. We are happy to answer any questions. I did neglect to put up my information. I just put it up. My email is my first initial, my last name @jrsm.com. We actually have a hotline where you can call us to ask questions. And we are very happy to provide risk management. We have provided risk management to several brokerages and realtors. We're happy to come to your organization and basically talk to the realtors about how to avoid trouble. And I know that, you know, most of my presentation today was focused on the immigration aspects and the recent developments, but we have defended realtors and brokers and real estate professionals exclusively for many years. So many members of my team are brokers themselves. And we know what these issues involved. We're happy to answer questions. We believe that it's always better to train people to avoid pitfalls than to defend them. I mean, we're happy to defend you, but we're hopeful that we can do risk management that would prevent the lawsuits to begin with. So if you have a question, please feel free to email me. I apologize that my phone number is not on there. I will send it to Laura, and then that way she can put it on the website, and people who have questions, I'm happy to take questions and answer them.
And I do have one question, Victoria.
Yes.
Let's see here. So for those who are worried that they already own real estate here, but they can't come to the US due to the immigration ban, what would you suggest?
Unfortunately, there's not very much to suggest because there are waivers. There is a very lengthy process where you could request a waiver. But the problem with the waiver system is that it is discretionary. And, you know, that basically means how does the officer feel? Because it's an all-encompassing and all-catching word, you know, the discretion. And I would encourage them to apply for a waiver, but I couldn't guarantee, I mean, not that you can guarantee anything, it's just we don't have very much hope with regards to the waiver process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm very honored that you invited me, and I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much.
I got one last question for you. I mean, we've got all these free classes that we're offering to our members and everything. I just wanted to see, are you willing to give us 100 billable hours for free? No.
We can discuss that, Brian.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. We appreciate it. And certainly we look forward to being in contact with you. I encourage that with our viewers so that we can make sure that we're not on the opposite side looking for you to defend us. So thank you again. Great. So our next speaker is Jennifer Hunt. Jennifer is the Vice President of the Real Estate Investment Network, and she began investing in real estate in 2009. Her real estate investing experiences range from investing in syndicated mortgages, MICs, REITs, with LIRAs, RRSPs, and TFSAs. You'll have to explain what those are. And she has a real estate portfolio including vacation rentals, residentials, and multifamily properties, both in Canada and the US. She has led and completed significant industrial real estate development projects in the US and commercial leases, some of which are high profile, unique deals, which, for instance, the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympic Games. And Jennifer is one of Canada's first real estate investment advisors. She supports the Real Estate Investment Network by drawing on 2 decades of a full range of general management experience, including business, leadership, management, performance, and motivation. In addition to these, Jennifer has supported REN with communication skills, and she holds a master's degree in communications, and her experience ranges from crisis management and experience ranges and sponsorship, to social, internal, and operational communications. Jennifer's real estate investing goal is to achieve her financial freedom by design. And she is investing for the long term and to supplement retirement with cash flow, appreciation, and mortgage principal buy down along the way. Much like her position at REN, Jennifer continues to wear the captain's hat outside of work, and in her free time, she loves to sail as a way to feed her love of adventure and travel. Jennifer, thank you for being a part of this, and we're excited to have you. We'd appreciate it. You got 40 minutes, and we're going to follow that up with, again, Q&A. So I'm looking forward to the discussion there too. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having me, and I will get right into this. So I'll just share my screen because hang on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. I have a lot of information for you here today. So I'm gonna just get right into it. We're gonna talk about why research matters in real estate investing. And I recognize that many of you are realtors, and so I'm going to show you a couple of statistics in just a moment as to why this matters to you about real estate investors and why research matters to them. So I am the Vice President of Research at the Real Estate Investment Network, and my contact information is there in terms of my email, info@reincanada.com. And a little bit about me. Thank you, Brian. You did a great introduction. So just to reiterate, I am not only head of research, and these are some of the research products that me and my research team, real estate research team, has put together just in the last 18 months or so. But also I am an active real estate investor. And I'm, again, both Canada and the US. You asked me to explain what RSP and TFSAs. That is very similar to the American version of a Roth IRA. And in Canada, we have the abilities to self-direct them into real estate assets. So thank you for that translation, the cross-border translation. I'm featured, and REIN is featured in a lot of media. Some of this may not look so familiar to you in terms of these media outlets. However, a number of them are very significant in Canada. So our agenda today, well, we're going to talk a little bit about diligence the REIN way. So we're going to talk about where to invest and some of the tools that we use, when to invest, and some of the tools we use, and then how to invest. And you're gonna get an opportunity, and I recommend take screen grabs or pictures of the screen. I'm totally fine with that. And then we're gonna talk about, and woven through this, is how to do some of these more in-depth diligence pieces, a quick analysis. And as real estate investors, you're gonna definitely, and realtors, who may have real estate investors, you'll definitely want to have these tools in your back pocket so that you can help educate your clients on where, when, and how to buy at any particular time in the location that they're doing. So I will give you some
Jennifer?
hands-on case studies.
Jennifer, before you start,
Yes.
some of your screen is blacked out. I don't know if you can see
Oh,
your presentation.
okay.
You
Thanks.
see that?
I
There you go.
think I can fix a little bit of it anyway. That one will go away. This one should kind of also go away. How's that?
Perfect.
Better?
Yeah. Thanks.
Hide floating meeting controls. I think that might work. One moment. How's that?
Better.
Thank you for
Good.
bringing that to my attention.
Yeah.
That's no fun. So we'll give you an overview of those formulas, both of REIN's long-term real estate success formula and the economic turmoil formula. Now, I know that this is going to be a lot of information for you. I am trying to cram 78 hours of content, 125 lessons, 15 modules in our Real Estate Investing in Canada online learning program. Now, I understand that it says Canada in it. However, with the exception of potentially just a handful of lessons, the core and the foundations of this real estate investing course truly apply to the majority of markets where a good semblance of law and democracy reign. Now, why this matters to you, and I'm going to share this just as a couple of sort of context, if you will. So this is based on the United States 2018 National Ownership and Management of Rental Properties. So this is based on the Rental Housing Finance Survey from 2018. And you can see that the individual investor, by far, is the major landlord, if you will, in the United States. And why this is important is because I believe that many folks get it into their minds that, you know, it's the institutional investors and it's the big real estate investment trusts. But in fact, the majority of rental housing in both the US and in Canada it's upwards of 70 to 80%, are owned by individual investors or LPs, LLCs, small corporations, private corporations. This is just another one. This was from May 18th, 2020, published in Bloomberg Business Week. I apologize, it's not the best quality, but it's a picture of a picture that we got this from a hard copy. But there again, you can see that who owns US residential property. This is also the individual investor truly is a predominant component in that 1 to 4 units. So we're going to dive into how to answer the question of where to invest. And we use REIN's Property Goldmine Scorecard, which is a list of about 17 different check marks. And we have a very different conversation. It's literally a checklist where of your market research tells you exactly what to look for, even sometimes where to go and ask for those questions, who to ask, what to look for, and it helps you identify and your clients identify where to invest so that they're making smart, strategic decisions without emotions, because this is about business. Now, because we're talking about the LA County, and I understand the Tri-Cities County with regard to Diamond Bar and Chino Hills and some of that area. Now, what we were able to do is pull back a little bit and get some of the area, and then what needs to be done next is to dive deeper into that local market. So I will provide you with this link today that we completed a REIN Property Goldmine Scorecard. Our research team and our team here provided this for you so that you can at least get a starting place, a sense of what the economy is doing, what the markets are looking at. And we look at key drivers, market influencers, and then we dive right into that neighborhood specific. So we get all these questions lead you to the outcome. And you can use this for your clients as well. So I will take that link in a moment at the end of the presentation, and I'll pop it in the chat for you so that you can have access to this scorecard. Now, economic fundamentals, they're key drivers. They are the major market influencers, and they propel the real estate market through the real estate cycle. they directly impact supply and demand, and they're typically quantitative. In other words, they're typically statistics and numbers and percentages, and they're relatively speaking, a little bit more a little easier to review, to find, and to manage. Now at REIN, we do a lot of different kinds of research, and these are some examples of reports that that have impacted or have a positive impact and really on real estate. So for example, we look at the transportation effect, and this again also applies this the transportation effect in particular and the university effect, but the transportation effect was done, I think it was done last year. And we've got 30 pages of the impact of LRT, metros, highway access points, and that type of thing on real estate. And although these are Canadian cities, a lot of this information applies across the US. In fact, these are based on peer-reviewed studies that both span North America. The university effect was brand new IP, never been done before, and it shows the impact, and there's a checklist in there of if a university or a post-secondary college or university will have a positive effect on your property or not. So there's definitely a checklist to go through, and also recreational properties. Also, I guess I'll put this here. If you just go to reincanada.com, you can find under our research, you can get a free research report there, any one of them that appeals to you. Now, market influencers, these are typically more temporary in nature. They're typically, I like to call them politics and policies. So anything that that's in the news, for example, Victoria was talking earlier about Trump's proclamation that came into effect today with regard to the ban on immigration, the majority of immigration, she explained. That definitely is a market influencer that impacts immigration, that actually impacts our real estate rental market and our housing market. And I'll show you how in just a moment. But again, these are typically more qualitative. And here are some of the research reports that we look at that are a bit more qualitative in nature. Millennials, for example, the demographics, who is your target client and who is your client's client in terms of the tenant profile that they're looking for example. Other market influencers include access to foreign capital, foreign demand. So we've been talking about immigration today, so foreign demand for that particular area, interest rates, and that's where we get into the inverted yield curve and how last year we were sharing and showcasing, and there's a lot of US information in that report about the impact of being able to predict a potential recession and other various reports. So now we want to understand, so we use all of those tools to identify where. That's your where. And now we want to answer when. When in the real estate cycle is it? Because when do you want to buy? Do you want to buy it at the high of the market? Or you want to buy it at the low of the market? Ideally, if you can time it, that's fantastic. I'm a big believer in investing in real estate, and one thing that I love to say is invest in real estate and wait. That was a quote from one of our REIN members, Thomas Beyer. So what about this real estate cycle? So what you need to know about it is that it's a proclivity for it to occur. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% on, but we all know that there's business cycles, and we've seen them in play, particularly over the last few years. It's regular, but it's also irregular because there's certain timings that we cannot predict. Its duration is not predictable. We can watch it, and we can watch the impacts and the potential changes and forecast that, but we really cannot predict that. So when we're talking crystal ball, that's why we've got our hand on the pulse of these economic fundamentals, the key drivers, and the market influencers to be able to catch a change very, very quickly. And it really does impact the creation and destruction of real estate wealth. If you've ever seen anyone who's bought at the top high of a market and it's taken years or even decades for it to recover, that can have a material impact for your clients. So being prepared and having this information and being able to showcase and support them in making even more informative decisions is always a great way to build your clientele. Now, it's a little bit complicated, but it's not that complicated. It is so the scorecard, we're going to talk about the scorecard first, which really is just shown in a in a clock in just a moment. It's like a combination lock. There are 16 components that go onto the scorecard, and when they all line up, we're able to identify exactly where it is, it being whatever market we're analyzing, where it is in the real estate cycle. So the key nugget here is that you want as many of your 16 drivers, I'll show you them in a moment, to match up and in sequence, just like a combination lock. And when they're out of sequence, well, you know what? Let's show you. So this is what it looks like. This is the scorecard. So ideally, what you want is those numbers to match up, and you get 16 out of 16. And if you get 10 out of 16, you know that it's pretty close. It's likely in that area. If it's 6 out of 16, probably it's not in that phase, or maybe it's in transition. So you need to dig deeper and look a little bit longer to make an informed decision. Now, once you know your area or your client's area that they're looking at, and you start to watch these indicators, I'll go back, these kinds of indicators on a regular basis, it is very simple to do on a napkin. You will know your markets. I'm sure many of you know your markets already that well, that if you were to put your concerted effort into that, you'd be able to identify where it is in the cycle immediately. So it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It just needs to be done thoughtfully with intention. So this is what it looks like on a clock. So we have the phases, key phases of a real estate cycle: the boom, the slump, the recovery. And in those 3 phases, we also divide them into 3 other tranches. Very cool names: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, why do we do that? Because there are different behaviors, there's different media, there's different emotions, there's different metrics that occur in each of those tranches. So we're able to even identify it further from just a boom to where we are in the boom, for example. And then we translate that into a tactics table. What the heck do you do? So what if it's in a boom or in a slump? We've just taken these 3 key tactics, buy and hold, rent to own, fix and flip, and kind of done a litmus test of what you should or should not consider. So your clients, for example, when it comes to the boom, the buy and hold, avoid at the end. So at the end of the boom, you'd want to avoid that. And for example, you want to buy at the end of the slump. That's an optimal time. Then we take this one step further, and yes, there are more tactics, and we're expanding this and having these conversations about short-term vacation rentals and what those look like, agreements for sale, assignments, fix and flip and refinance, vendor take back. And there are certain times that work better. It's certain cycles, phases of the cycle, pardon me, that are better for various tactics. So now that's a lot of detail, but in terms of all of those various tools that we use. But here's a nice little way of putting it in terms of our formula. So this is our long-term real estate success formula, and we focus on key drivers and a couple, so key drivers. It becomes a mathematical relationship. We see this sort of correlation. And what's really important is that we have driving indicators and lagging indicators. So here, please take a picture of this. I'm happy for you to take a picture of it. If you take away nothing else from this presentation, I would be delighted if it's this, because this is game changer for many, many people and can support your real estate investors in an incredible way. When you look at the economic fundamentals, this is the components in green: the gross domestic product. So how's the economy doing? The employment and the population growth. So are there jobs? And are people coming in for those jobs? That's why Victoria's conversation about immigration is also very important, because that can attribute to population growth as well. And if you'll note, those 3 components, again, this is the condensed version formula, those 3 really drive the rental market, because then people come in and they want to have, a place to live. It is very, very common, and the statistics are the same are similar for Canada and the US, that especially when it comes to immigrants or interstate migration and even intra-state migration. So for example, think about you moving in to get a new job in a nearby city. You might not know that city very well, and so you may choose to actually go and rent for a little while before you buy. And in the case with immigrants, they typically rent for a lot longer before they buy. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that increases the rental demand, which of course decreases the vacancy and increases rents. And then 18 months later, so you'll see that there's a time lag. 18 months later, we see property demand increase and then the prices. So once you see a GDP or an economic event, you can look down for about 24 months of almost 2 years and be ahead of the curve. Now, yes, there are different factors, market influencers, that do come in and can kind of speed it up or slow it down. But if you take this as a really general rule of thumb, you'll be well suited. So now we have the economic turmoil formula, which is the exact same, but in reverse, which is what we're experiencing based on the single largest market influencer of our time, which is the coronavirus pandemic. So as a result, we have seen GDP go down, unemployment, record numbers there, population decline. We were just talking about immigration being ceased or banned for the end of 2020. So as a result, we can expect, based on this formula, to see that rental demand will go down and that prices will go down. However, there are a lot of mitigating factors, and I'll talk about some of them a little bit later, of what is buoying some of our rental and property markets throughout this pandemic. So as you can see, that is the influence of the pandemic on, of course, the politicians, which of course impact the policies. So an example of, and we've kind of actually talked about them, so you can appreciate some of the policies that affects, for example, rent. That would be rent control or bans on evictions that have occurred due to the pandemic, those types of things. So here are some basic, some key economic fundamentals for the US. The GDP is down 16% in Q2 2020. Unemployment rate is down 13%. Population immigration has slowed due to border closures for now, and also due to Trump's recent proclamation 2 days ago. There we are. So now, are we seeing a V-shaped recession? It's still anticipated in the US that there will be a V-shaped recession and that there is some good hope with a fairly quick rebound. In Canada, it's actually quite a bit slower, and we actually are thinking that it's going to be, just because of the size of our economy, and we're looking at it to be more like, if you remember the song Cake, short skirt and a long jacket, it's going to be a short down and then a long tail. So we're calling it a check mark or a swoosh. And it's even possible that we're expecting another little dip, so a W with a swoosh. But I want to give you a case study of all of this in actual practice. It's one thing to talk about theory, but it's another thing to see it actually in play. And so I've called this for you. It's an example in Calgary, Alberta, so just north of Montana, and it really will help show this. Now, I know that this is a Canadian example, but this works and this applies in the US as well. So again, we're looking at that impact of GDP. We're going to look out 18 months later, and then we're going to see what happens to property prices. So this is what it really looks like. In 2009, Calgary, this is the red line here, Calgary GDP, so gross domestic product, went down, not went down, but it was -5%. So it was negative growth. That is not good for the economy. But what happened? So here we can see it on a timeline. This is actually the benchmark price performance over time. So in 2009, okay, that's where the GDP went down. But you can see about 18 months later, those property prices were still going up. And it wasn't until afterwards that they went down. And that's where that lag, those key indicators and the lagging, the key drivers and then the lagging indicators really start to show up. And you'll want to definitely advise your clients, especially investor clients, what that could look like, and also help them understand shock. I'll give you one more example. This is the stuff that I watch and my team watches, this long, boring, invisible, who talks about the economic health and GDP. I know it's kind of boring, but it's really a great place to be focusing your attentions in real estate. So in 2015 and 2016, again, Calgary had negative growth. was not good years in 2015 and 2016. And you can see that the benchmark home prices, again, didn't start to drop until 18 months to 2 years later. Now, we also look at sensational and confusing. Has anybody found this of the news lately? There's a lot of scary news. And it's my job and REIN's job to weed through that. So we really focus on fact versus fiction. And I'm going to give you an example of sensational news. I lived in Detroit for 3 years, so I know American news and I know it's sensational. And I actually did my master's degree on American news, interestingly enough, and it's whether or not it's sensational and if it's been growing over time. So I have a thesis, and my thesis stands true, but this is what I practice every day. Is looking behind the curtain. So this is a bit of an example of a sensational news headline. Now this is COVID-19, Ontario to close all non-essential businesses. Schools won't reopen until April 6th. That's the headline. Now I know that your neighborhood, you've got Ontario, California, and this probably could have been a similar headline there. This happens to reflect Ontario, Canada, the province. What scared people in this was, this is what it said, quote unquote, only grocery stores, pharmacies, takeout and delivery restaurants, essential manufacturing industries and supply chain suppliers, liquor stores allowed to remain open. You might wonder, why liquor stores? Well, they happen to be provincially governed in Canada, so the provincial government wanted to have those liquor stores. But if you just read this, wow, that's a lot that's shutting down. And I got calls from our REIN membership and emails. People were very, very scared. But we look into the facts. And actually, when we looked into the facts at that time, the official list of essential workplaces included 74 sectors, which included hundreds of specific workplaces that would remain open underneath them. So while we saw this as sensational news, when we dug into the facts, it wasn't, at that time, it wasn't as scary as it appeared. And that's what we provide with our What's Behind the Curtain at REIN. And I understand that you're in the US, but I just wanted you to know that looking behind that and having that critical thinking and looking at different reliable sources, whether they're banks or big institutions or government websites, are definitely helpful for you to get the right information for your clients and make them fact-based decisions. So we're just going to give you a bit of an example of how you can apply this right there in LA County. So we looked at some economic fundamentals, as I mentioned, in that gold mine scorecard that I'm going to be giving you after this. But then also, I wanted to show you what some of the headlines might be so that you could start to fit those headlines into your new formula. So for example, in GDP, LA County wants to give $3,000 each to small businesses coming back from coronavirus. So now we're seeing, okay, small businesses are coming back. Pardon me, we're also seeing that the LA County is looking to support small business, which is a key driver of the economy. Okay, so that's good news. We want to be watching for more developments on those. And by the way, these were all from the last couple of days, mostly June 22nd. So today is the 24th, so recent headlines. From the San Fernando Business Journal, Fernando Valley Business Journal, LA County's record unemployment tops 20% for second month. As we know, employment has been significantly impacted. And then population. Trump freezes in. Victoria talked about this, so that was fantastic. Indeed, we've been watching this as well, and that on the 22nd, Trump freezed immigration for the rest of 2020. So I already mentioned how that might impact not only sort of immigration, but potential clients and also the rental market. Now we'll turn to some headlines in the rental market. So we've got here rental demand and rent price. So rental demand, decline in home ownership, rent will boost rental demand. We're seeing a possible shift demand towards renting rather than owning. Now, this is where I would recommend digging in a little bit further, what's really going on. And I'll show you something at the end of this or shortly that will help you understand where those demands are changing and if they are and how long they might stay for. The rent price, the pandemic ushered in a dip in LA County rent prices. This we've seen across North America. There was definitely just a squeeze particularly for the months of April and into May. Nobody was moving anywhere during those critical moments of the pandemic. And that really resulted in a rental market freeze as well as a property market freeze, which we'll see in just a moment. So in regard to property demand, we're starting to see a real shift. There's been pent-up demand for a couple of months, and that is being unleashed, and we're starting to see that movement, both in LA County and definitely in key markets in Canada as well. And property prices, looking for house prices to drop, wait until next April. That's interesting because that aligns with REIN's economic turmoil formula to wait that 18 months to 2 years to see that. But in LA County, they're expecting it to increase. So that's something to keep in mind and to look into and to watch. This is always just a snapshot in time, and at any moment, anything can change to change any one of these. So you need to become that expert, I'm sure you are already, for your client. Now, is there a decrease in demand for rent? Emotions, people were not wanting to move, less immigration, obviously the closed borders and seasonal workers have been affected. And then students, we all know what's happened there. International students has gone right down, and domestic students, they're not at universities as much in colleges because they've gone online. And so there's been a real decrease in demand for rentals. Supply, on the other hand, we've also seen short-term rentals. So for example, inventory that was on Airbnb or VRBO or those kinds of hosting sites, well, they've had to really reconfigure, and many of them have come on the market as long-term rentals, in some cases long-term executive rentals in terms of fully furnished. So there's also new rentals in the market that are coming on just from being completed. Housing construction continued. But REIN's been watching the coronavirus since last December 2019. We had it on our radar as potentially impacting foreign investment in real estate. And this, of course, was focused on Canada, but it's very similar market in terms of foreign investment into the US as well. So this is actually also one of the reports that you could get to at our REINCanada.com website. And while the details of it have definitely shifted, we published this, was ready for publication in January, and it was officially launched to the public, I think it was like February 8th. So still pretty near the beginning. So a lot of the nuances don't apply, but the key foundations and the key conclusions absolutely remain in place. And we're starting to see this in Canada, especially already, with foreign capital starting to come in and the doors opening again. Not the actual close the borders, but rather the influx of money. Money is starting to look to buy in Canada. So when it all clears, foreign capital is going to shift to safe havens in the world, and particularly real estate globally. The demand for rental and for property, so rental units as well as property units and immigration. Now, of course, we know that the borders are closed now, but when the borders do open and the bans do change, and if Victoria is successful in her lobbying efforts, as she was mentioning earlier, about opening and supporting immigration policies, then potentially that floodgate may open as well. So there is a likely future positive lift in rental and housing markets because of this impact. And again, there will also have been a pent-up of demand that will really want to flood the market. So right before then, there's going to be a buying opportunity. Oh yeah, there you go. So you can get a research report here if you like. So what else to watch out for? There is going to likely be an increased rental demand. Now I know we've got to kind of, what's this all about? Because lots of folks have lost their investments or their functional use of some of their savings. In Canada anyway, and I haven't confirmed this for the US, so I won't say that, but in Canada we have seen an increase in divorces and splitting up, and then often what happens in that case, one of the parties moves out, or both, of the family home and both rent initially or one or the other rents. So again, that's going to increase that rental demand. And then needing to downsize due to a lost job or to a lower income or even relocating to a new job if they can get something there. So those are components from the coronavirus pandemic, from COVID-19, that are likely to increase that rental demand. We're also, what else to watch out for is increase in property demand. There's been some challenges out there with alternative investments. Some have been playing stocks really well, that's great, but they tend to work differently. And so a lot of new and different money that was traditionally, into these stocks are now moving, and we are seeing the shift into more into real estate. And real estate is typically relatively more stable during turbulent times. And historically, multifamily or multi-unit residential, so apartment buildings, for instance, those are even the most stable during a turbulent time. So that's something, because people do need a place to live. So conclusions, there's opportunity. And small investors, I'm just going to remind you, small investors provide most rental housing supply in the US and in Canada. And savvy investors look at different metrics and different indicators. We have a very different conversation when we're at a cocktail party and we hear people talking about housing prices. I'm going, okay, that might be about 2 years out. So we want to be 2 years behind, I should say. So that's why we're having a conversation about the economy, jobs, population, immigration policies, demographics, super sexy stuff, but it'll help make you and your clients lots of money. And we know what investors are looking at. So stay informed. And again, feel free to, if you'd like to learn more, this was just a fire hose of information for you. This is supposed to be 78 hours of content in about 40 minutes. So thank you for staying with me. And I always like to end my conversations with that's your real news, real intelligence, real time, and hopefully real useful.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Now I'm just trying to get there we are. Perfect. Great.
So I don't see any questions as of yet. Brian, do you have anything?
Yeah, actually, so I think many of us on the call or on the Zoom are involved in working with investors, and certainly we want to know here. I also do property management, so we've hit, obviously with COVID and so forth, you've got people who may not be paying rent and so forth. Some of those factors that came in. One of the things I wanted to know is, okay, we do student leasing, you mentioned like Airbnb and so forth. These are all things that are affected because students aren't at the state schools and everything. They're not there. They're going to be going virtual, right?
Yeah.
Got the Airbnb, people can't travel, so they're not able to make it to their Airbnb places. And I think you mentioned that they're going to be more long-term, at least.
Yeah, many are shifting to long-term. That's right.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. And then I've also read an article where commercial properties are hurting really bad, and so they may be converting into residential property and so forth. So wanted to get your input on, and also the fact, here we are, we're in California. We just, as of January, have statewide rent control. Can you speak to some of those things? And
I can speak to all of them.
a sense of like, what are Canadian investors thinking in terms of investing in California? Or you said also that Canada, their economy might take a little longer to grow, right? To come out of that. So what does that mean in terms of those of us or our investors that are here that might want to invest in Canada? If you can touch on those.
Okay, great. Yeah, for sure. So with regard to student rentals, 100%, we're in the same boat up here across north of the border with regard to universities. They are 100%. Oh yeah, thanks, Jim. I definitely will. I'll just answer these questions and I'll pop the scorecard link in the chat afterwards. Thank you, Jim. So many of the universities here have gone virtual as well. So there's a couple of different things that I recommend. First of all, if you are in student rentals, be prepared to what I call put in a pandemic pivot to protect your properties. This is absolutely critical. Now, that may not mean, it may or may not mean getting out of student rentals entirely. It may mean getting into a very, very niche program. So for example, I have some student rentals in my portfolio, and I've been very, very grateful because the folks that I have are in a 2-year master's degree program. This was year one, ending year one of year two, but they're also international students and they can't leave. So we've been able to extend their leases and support them in that way. So that's good. Another really practical way is to, and this is all in the scorecard in the University Effect Report. If you go through it, you will have every answer you need so that you can make sure you're doing the diligence, because not every university is created equal, and there's very specific zonings. For example, I lived in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, go blue, and you know, there's different zonings there, and I love there. I'd love to buy more property there. Oh my gosh, that was my very first home. But you want to know what can be a student rental, what can't be a student rental, and you need to go through those diligence processes. But another way that I've been able to put in a pandemic pivot to protect my university student housing, because I knew this was happening, is I selected and marketed to very specific program students in certain programs who had to do practical in-person training. So for example, pilots, they can't do their training from home. And we selected a college with a 4-year degree, talked to the college, got the students, and now we've got tenants for a 4-year lease. So it does require some more effort. It can be done. I definitely don't recommend getting into student rentals right now, but if you are in them, do your diligence, go the extra step.
Yeah, if anything, I see that now is a great time to start picking up those properties. You could make them into a short-term rental and then maybe be ready for the next season, obviously when the restrictions, you know, lighten up and everything, because they are such a great return on investment. But
yes, and they provide, again, each university is not created equal, but they can, the average is at least a 4, I'm going to be conservative, about a 4% lift in your rent and your values. And of course, that anytime that you can get that insulation around your property is always good.
right. So go to the, I'm sorry, forgive me. So touch on, there was 2 things other than that. One is rent control in California. How is that affected? And then the other part again was for our investors to Canada. What is the outlook there?
Yeah. So with regard to rent controls, and then these were just implemented in California, correct?
Yeah, single family are exempt, but unless it's an LLC that's held by a corporation, but otherwise duplex and above is under rent control.
Okay,
right.
So most of my portfolio is in locations with rent controls in Canada. So I'm very familiar. And what I would recommend and urge is to get ahead of, I want to say this correctly, educate yourself on the ways that you can effectively implement rent controls quickly. So in Ontario, Canada, for example, there's rent controls, and there are ways that you can increase your rent at what they call above guideline increases. So you'll want to dig in to see if there's similar opportunities, and never miss an opportunity, because many of them are timed, like in Canada anyway. The locations that do have rent control, they're provincially or state governed similarly, that those typically, they expire. So let's say you do a capital improvement to one of your buildings, then that can give you an opportunity to make a case to the government and say, hey, I'd like to get my rent up to help support the payment of the capital improvement, but it has a deadline, so if you miss that deadline. So make sure that you get informed and figure those out, and that's my recommendation there. And then with regard to Canadian investors, so I know that there's, and I just read an article yesterday about very high demand for Canadians still moving down to the US, and for Canadians still buying, like the snowbird mentality. It's cold up here, guys. Like, it just is. For that reason, my rental properties and my other properties in the US are in Hawaii. And I was just on the phone with their landlord and tenant board today. So that it's a huge demand. So it was great having Victoria on and sharing those opportunities from that perspective, because it's only growing when we look at the demographics of baby boomers. There's also another component there of affordability. So Canada's real estate is, especially in Vancouver and in Toronto, our key markets, the affordability it's upwards of 120%. It's crazy. It's way high in terms of affordability index. So folks who are, retiring, they still want to go down to Canada, or sorry, to the US. But I think you actually were asking also about the US folks investing in Canada. So from that perspective, your dollar alone is a 40% beneficial factor on, so things will look a lot cheaper from that way, from a foreign exchange perspective. And if you'd like, one of the reports that also was just published on our REIN research page is I just completed a real estate cycle update for the key 3 provinces of British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, and the 5 top cities in Canada. And it shows exactly where we are in the real estate cycle. And we are coming into that buying opportunity, entering into the slump. There's probably still another couple of months for that slump to really get into play. But our GDP is starting to pick up again. So we're going to see this really come into fruition sort of in about December, January, I believe.
Got it. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of other questions out there, and I do want to make sure that we get to our last speaker. You are fantastic. Thank you very much. I hope our audience got a great value from that. And I know that they've got your contact info as well, so we'll look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I will put all of that in the chat, and then I'm going to sign off because I've got another presentation.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you very much.
And Jennifer, terrific. So our last speaker, I'm excited to introduce, because correct me in how we say this, but our affiliation with NAR has given us a partnership with another country. Is that correct, Laura? How would you say it? And we're fortunate.
Malaysia is our ambassador association.
Yes. So we're excited to have Senior Lim Boon Ping. I hope I said that correctly. And he's a surveyor. He graduated with a Bachelor of Property from University of Auckland, New Zealand in 1999. And he's gotten himself registered with the Board of Valuers, Appraisers, Estate Agents, and Property Managers. That's with BOVEAP in 2002 as a registered real estate agent. In 2002, he also was elected to the Johor branch chair of MIEA. And since then, he's been actively involved with the MIEA. In 2017, he was elected as president-elect and later become president in 2019. He has over 20 years real estate experience in Malaysia, a real estate trainer, director of Kim Realty, and ex-board member of BOVEAP under the Ministry of Finance Malaysia. He's a fellow member of Malaysia Institute of Estate Agents, which is the MIEA I referenced before, member of Royal Institute of Surveyors Malaysia, member of the Association of Valuers, Property Managers, Estate Agents, and Property Consultants in the Private Sectors Malaysia, and the member of the Malaysian Institute of Property and Facilities Managers. We are so excited to have you here. We're glad that you can make it. For those of you viewing, I want you to know this guy got up incredibly early. I think it was like 6 a.m. or earlier when he first joined with us to connect. And we are so glad that you were patient to wait with us. And we're excited to hear what you have to say. And of course, we look forward to building on this relationship. Yep. So Mr. Lim Boon Ping.
Yes. Thanks, Brian. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Actually, SR stands for surveyor. Yeah. Let me just quickly bring up my slides.
Okay.
Okay. So this is about, I'm told to make some presentations on the real estate agency market in Malaysia. And to put things into perspective, I will start from giving you all an overview on how the real estate market in Malaysia is like. Probably most of you are not very familiar with our market here. And then I will proceed on talking about a little bit on the registration of real estate agents and negotiators and how we actually works in Malaysia, how agents works. And also I will be touching on what is the property transaction process and foreigner property ownership in Malaysia, in case some of you may want to do some cross-border transaction. I think in today's market, due to this COVID-19, the world is really pushing through to another level of borderless transaction, especially through all this Zoom. Yeah, and I will end it with a little bit of introduction on what Malaysian Institute of Estate Agents is all about and what we do. So I always like to, for those who doesn't really know about Malaysian property market, I always like to start with this particular graph, which tells you a lot of stories. Yeah, because this is actually a graph on transacted properties, total transacted properties in Malaysia for the past 29 years, 1990 to 2019 until last year. Now, just now Jennifer mentioned about when is the best time to buy, which is also the million-dollar question that many Malaysian investors are asking, or our foreign investors. So if we really look at this particular graph, look at Malaysian property market for the past 29 years, you will actually notice few things. Number one, the first observation is, if we look at Malaysian property market in a short-term interval, sometime the property market will go up, sometime it will go down. It basically means, it simply says the Malaysian property market in short-term interval, it actually fluctuates. So what about if I ask you, what is the trend of Malaysian property market for the past 29 years? And most of you will be able to answer me that it is actually going through a very steadily growth. It's actually a very high growth if you ask me, okay? So by combining these two observations here, looking at Malaysian property market, we are very comfortably to say this. Whenever my client asks me, when is the best time to buy, to invest in property in Malaysia, my answer will be, it doesn't matter when you buy. It really doesn't matter when you buy. It only matters when you sell, okay? It doesn't matter when you buy, it only matters when you sell. Let me give you one best example. Look at 1997 financial crisis, which was the worst crisis of, I think, other than COVID-19. 1997 Asia financial crisis was the worst crisis in Malaysia. We had the property market practically crashed. Yeah. So I, as a real estate practitioner, I just came back at that point of time. I just came back from New Zealand, and I actually bought my first property right before it fall. At the peak time, I bought my first property at the peak time right before it fall. So at that point of time, people are telling me, Lim, how come you're not so clever? You're in this line, but you actually bought the property at the highest point. But what happened if I tell you I actually hold that particular property in 1997 until today, which I did, okay? So suddenly you can't imagine how many fold that this particular property has actually multiplied over the past 20 years. So, and then very interestingly, in Malaysia, especially Malaysian Chinese, we actually have one habit, or you can call it culture, every time we have a children, we will actually tend to buy one particular property when the baby is born. So we will keep that particular property until the baby grew up, and the moment when he want to go for overseas to do the tertiary studies, like maybe coming to US, to Australia, then the parent will actually sell off that particular property to use that money to pay for all the expenses. So this again tells us that in Malaysia, basically, I'm sure actually it happens in all over the world, but in Malaysia in particularly, property is definitely a good long-term investment. So it doesn't really matter when you buy, it only matters when you sell, okay? And as of you, and also you can see from this graph, Malaysians, we are more affected during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and also the subprime crisis. Of course, I'll be touching a little bit on the COVID-19, which is not really my focus today, but it does affect us. Before I go on the COVID-19, which is the latest statistics of this year, you will notice actually Malaysian property market has an exponential growth since year 2000. And then it started to slow down after 2014. That was because the government saw the property market was too hot. So they decided to come in to impose some cooling measures to cool the property down. Then for the past 2-3 years, the property market has been very soft actually in Malaysia. And we are actually expecting a slow recovery in 2020 until COVID-19 actually hit us. So this is a representation of what is in terms of sector of the contribution of different sector. In Malaysia, we have the residential property market is as much as 63.7%, and then followed by agricultural, commercial market, and also development and industrial. Now, this is also giving you a hint on what are the percentage that agents are working on. So you can actually safely say at least more than 70% of Malaysian real estate agents are actively involved in residential property, okay? Of course, if you take a look at in terms of transaction value, the value of commercial property started to grow very high, but for sure, I'm sure it's the same trend everywhere in the world. Commercial property, especially because of COVID-19, will be the worst hit, all right? Now, this is actually hot from the oven, from our government data, the first quarter, which is the first quarter from January to March this year. And of course, you all know the COVID-19 actually started in last December or early January in China. So even that at that point of time already starting to affect our economy in a way. And also, just for your information, Malaysian government actually went into, started the lockdown where we actually call MCO, Movement Control Order. Yeah, MCO. Our lockdown actually started on the 18th of March. 18th of March. So when lockdown happened, basically all the legal firm cannot operate, the land office cannot operate. Generally, there is zero transaction right after the 18th of March. So as you can see from this particular information here, it tells you about the quarter one is comparing the quarter one of 2019 to quarter one 2020. You will actually notice that even on quarter one, which is not the most serious timing, the most serious timing is definitely quarter two, which we haven't seen the official data yet. Our property market is already going through in terms of total number of units transaction already dropped by 13%, 13.6% to be more exact. All right. If we look at, but of course, do take note, residential is actually the majority, and residential is somewhere around 10%, right? And when it comes to value, the value actually dropped by 22. But of course, again, I want to bring your attention from you to residential sector, because residential is actually forms the majority of the transaction, which is somewhere around 14.10. And that was exactly what I anticipated. The price adjustment the price adjustment, Yami, raise hand. Is there a question? Or can I take the question towards the end, if you don't mind? So there is a, I actually estimated the price change, the price adjustment to be somewhere around 10% at least, lah. All right, because of this COVID-19. So we are very badly hit. And like I said, the worst is yet to come. The second quarter data will be a lot more serious. Yeah. But then again, there is always a silver lining. The International Monetary Fund and many other international research houses, they are very positive with Malaysian economy. So most of them actually projected Malaysian economy to do very well, rebound latest by next year. Yeah, by next year. And we as a practice, and usually when the GDP increases by next year, IMF actually projected Malaysian GDP by next year is 9%. I think it's 9.2%, which is, I think it's a little bit high, but anyway, they are very positive, very optimistic. So usually property market will follow 6 months later. So we will actually think that, latest by the second half of next year, property market in Malaysia should do quite well, should start to recover. So let's quickly come in, talk to let you know how does a registration or estate agency in Malaysia works. Basically, the practitioner, we are all registered under the Board of Valuers, Appraisers, Estate Agents, and Property Managers under the Ministry of Finance. This is actually came under the Act of Parliament 242. Number 242. Okay, I used to be one of the board of directors here, and we have basically two types of real estate agent. The first is what we call the registered estate agent, who are the principal people like me. How do you know? Actually, you can look at their personal identity cards e-number. We call it e-number, personal e-number. Okay. And we can actually operate and open a registered firm. And under this registered firm, people like me, we are allowed to employ 50 real estate negotiators. We will talk about real estate negotiators shortly. And total, the running number of registered estate agent in the whole Malaysia is 2,900. And why I use the word running number is because actually, some of them already retired, some of them already migrated to heaven. So this is 2,900 is not what we call active practitioner. The active practitioner is actually less than 2,000. And just to give you a background information, Malaysia is having 30 million population. So we don't have a lot of registered estate agents around. Plenty of opportunity. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, Malaysia just opened up our law to allow foreigner to also become registered estate agent in Malaysia. Yeah. So the second tier is what we call the real estate negotiator. We under the act, it was defined that they are the assistant, they are the salesperson, and they are the assistant to REA, registered estate agent. And you can identify them by looking at their REIN number. Okay. They must work under a registered firm, and they work under one particular supervisor who must be a principal, who must be an estate agent. And total, the running number is 41,000, and similar to real estate agent just now, the total active real estate negotiator in Malaysia now, we are actually estimating at about 18,000, which is slightly less than half. Right, especially during the crisis, every time during crisis, a lot of people were actually just leaving, just left the industry. Now let me quickly comes to the investment part in Malaysia, the foreign ownership part. First of all, of course, you all just need to know that the exchange rate, yeah, ringgit Malaysia is very much cheaper. $1 USD is equivalent to minimum 4 ringgit, yeah, minimum 4 ringgit. So whatever amount that you see in ringgit Malaysia, you just divide by 4. So let's talk about foreign property ownership in Malaysia. Generally in Malaysia, the foreign ownership is still considered very low. In the region, some countries, when I say region, I'm referring to ASEAN, right? In ASEAN, in some countries, the foreign property ownership is actually up to 10 to 15%. But in the case of Malaysia, it's only 3%, still very low. So we are definitely seeing this number increasing over the next 10 years. There are some minimum threshold as to what you can buy. I have another more detailed table. I think if any of you wanted the slide, I don't mind emailing the whole slide to Laura, so you all can actually get it from her, okay? I have a more detailed slide on what are the property that your client or you as a foreigner can purchase in Malaysia. Basically, we control two things. Number one is in terms of price threshold, minimum 1 million. Minimum 1 million ringgit Malaysia, not USD. So it's only about 250,000 USD. And you're allowed to get a loan. So the entry level is really not expensive. Yeah, it's really not expensive. And of course, sometimes there are certain types of property that foreigners cannot buy. Yeah. And when it comes to the transaction, we actually require a state consent whenever there is a foreign buyer, which may take extra 1 to 3 months time. And when it comes to cost, the foreigner, actually Malaysian government is very fair to foreigners. We basically ask the foreigners to pay exactly the same cost like local. So usually when you buy a property, we will ask you to stand by extra 5%. Okay, your cost of purchase should be at least extra 5% from the existing price to pay for the legal fee, the stamp duty, the disbursement, yeah, all those things, about 5%, which is exactly the same as local. The only thing is on certain states, yeah. So on certain states in Malaysia, they do impose some levy, but not too expensive also. It ranges from 2,005 USD to about 5,000 USD. Okay, which is very cheap compared to Singapore, which they actually charge 20% for the levy for foreigners. So that's the cost of purchase, rule of thumb, at about 5% of purchase price. And what about cost of selling? Now, cost of selling, you are very similar to local also. If you hold a property more than 5 years, meaning you are a long-term investor, you don't speculate. Like Malaysian government, we don't like people to speculate. So there is a real property gain tax. So if you sell within 2 years, we will charge you on your gain, on your profit, 30%. But if you hold it more than 5 years, you're going to get charged 10%. All right, on the profit, not the whole amount. Yeah, it's only on the profit. So how big is the expat community in Malaysia? Those holding expat visa is about 100,000 so far, and most of them is actually in a bigger city like Kuala Lumpur, Penang, yeah, these two places. And their dependence is approximately 200,000. Now, this is one good reason why you should probably invest in Malaysia or get your investor to buy in Malaysia. Let's look at Big Mac Index. How much is the Big Mac in Malaysia or in the world? So this was actually taken out from, I think, from Wikipedia last year, I think. This is on 2018. So the most expensive Big Mac in the world is actually from Switzerland, followed by Sweden and United States. And if you really like to eat Big Mac, come to Malaysia. Come to Malaysia. We are one of the cheapest. Yeah, you can see from there, we are actually one of the cheapest. Now, Big Mac is actually a very good purchasing power parities comparison as to one local dollar. How much can you actually buy from that particular one local dollar? So Big Mac Index is always a very good comparison. So this you can actually manage to see, even though Malaysia is a very developed, quite a developed country, but it's a big cities, but our cost of living is really very low. And this is one of the main reasons why we actually attract a lot of foreigners to come and stay in Malaysia. Now, one of the things that good thing about Malaysia is if you are a foreigner, you coming to purchase property, you are allowed to actually get loan from local bank as long as you can actually get show proof of your income. All right, and the loan can actually be as high as 80 to 90%. So this is the minimum threshold that I was referring to, all according to all different states. This is the detail of it. I won't drill into it, but generally is minimum 1 million ringgit Malaysia. These are the things that you can buy. So we also have this Malaysia My Second Home for those who are interested to purchase a property in Malaysia, or you want a multiple. Yeah, it gives you a 10 years multiple entry visa. Yeah, 10 years multiple entry visa to Malaysia. So and also you'll be able to buy properties under a special package. Just a very brief introduction of Malaysian land law. We adopt the torrent system of title registration, meaning there's actually a centralized land registry. For every property, there are actually 2 identical titles for each property. One kept at the land registry, another one kept with the owner. And we have freehold and leasehold property. Usually when we, of course, freehold is in perpetuity, but leasehold, usually if it's issued under our national land code, it is maximum 99 years. If you are coming to bigger cities like Kuala Lumpur, you may see more leasehold property. Otherwise, actually, most of the properties in Malaysia are considered freehold. And foreigners are allowed to own freehold properties in Malaysia, no issue. So this is the snapshot on how the property transaction is like, the process. So first of all, let's say today you purchase a property. After viewing the property with an agent, you like it, so the agent will get you to pay minimum 2%, 2 to 3%, okay? Minimum 2%, what we call earnest deposit, and you will sign the booking form, after which within the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks, you are expected to sign the sale and purchase agreement with the owner, where you have to pay the balance 10%. Yeah, so this is why you are paying the 8% here, because in booking form time, you already paid the first 2%. So after that, you will be given 3 + 1 month to do the adjudication process. Yeah, we call it adjudication process, which the government valuer will come in to do a government valuation, and in order to calculate your stamp duty. So after that, you have to pay the stamp duty, and this process will take at least 1 to 2 months time, usually about 2 months at least. And then after this is done, of course, your loan will be released. If you are taking a loan, the loan will be released at least in the 3rd month. After that, after the loan release, the lawyer representing you will present the land title to the land office to transfer the name. Yeah, to transfer the name from people from the first owner to you. But of course, like I mentioned just now, whenever there is a foreign purchase, you actually need an extra step, which is to apply for a foreign consent. Yeah, a foreign consent that will start at the SPA time. So your SPA time, before it start running, after you sign the SPA time, the lawyer will apply to the state government for a foreign consent, which will normally take about 1 to 3 months. So of course, at the end of the day, after the presentation of title to the land registry office, the agent will hand over the key or hand over the vacant possession to you. So all in, the whole process will take about 4 months or maybe 6 months, depending on how long that it takes to get your state's consent for foreign purchase. Just coming a little bit, I'm going to end with a bit of MIEA. So this is actually a news extracted from a yes paper on our MIEA convention. Our MIEA convention is our national, one of our biggest events. There is a 2 full-day convention. Every year we have been doing it for the past 35 years. And we actually done this MIEA convention about 2 weeks right before lockdown. 2 weeks right before lockdown, some 500 people attended this 2-day convention. And the theme the theme of this two-day convention is all about embracing technology. And in my speech as a president of MIEA, I always tell people that we have, as an agent, we have to stop calling IT a disruption. Instead, we must learn how to make use of IT to make our service better. I think that is the most important part, and that is the main objective of my my presidency term. All right. So during the convention, we actually launched 2 apps. One which is called My Agent Data. The other one is called My MIEA Loan Check. So all these apps, which is actually meant to help to increase the efficiency and professionalism of especially our members. So this is one of the things that we did during lockdown. Because of lockdown, we used to have a lot of physical classes, but because of lockdown, we can't. Yeah, nobody can really go out, so we can't, and therefore we actually started online classes. We actually bring all our education program online during the MCO. I think first month, 1.5 months itself, we have completed and done over 75 online forum and discussion and webinar. And this is actually one of the thing, one of the setup that we do. And for our studio one, we set it up ourselves. We have the laptop, the touch screen, the iPad, and then the lighting and this stuff. It's actually very interesting. Okay, something we have to move with the time and move on the changes. Yeah, so we have received a really resounding support and appreciation from the practitioner from all over Malaysia on our education thing. Other than that, some of the new technology initiative from us during my presidency. Of course, the first one is the MIEA agent data, which includes all the, we have 2 tiers of transaction data here. The first tier is the government official transaction data. The second tier is where you actually gathered all the 6,000 over members from MIEA to start giving us their transaction figure. So what people may ask, what's the difference between agents' transactions and the government official data? It's actually in terms of timing. In Malaysia, because of, I already gone through with you just now, for every property transaction, it will take minimum 4 months. 4 months. So if you sign a share and purchase agreement today, by the time the government gathered all the official data, it will be 3 to 4 months later. That's the fastest. But this is why our official data is always not timely enough, which is not good enough. This is why MIEA come up with this. We ask our agent, our members to give us their transaction data the moment they collect the booking money. That is how early we want it to be. So our transaction data will be very timely. Even after, it will probably take 1 or 2 years to build out the traction, but right after you get the traction, we strongly believe MIEA will be able to advise the government in future where is the property market is heading. Yeah, so that is a game changer. And then MIEA loan check. One of the biggest problem in Malaysian property right now is getting loan. It is very the banks are actually making the loan application more and more stringent. So we pay out with this technology firm and we come out with this apps called MIEA Loan Check. What this is going to help our agent is, let's say you are sitting right in front of your customer, and the moment your customer are thinking whether I want to purchase, okay, he said he want to purchase, you can actually right in front of him key in the information, okay, and then a message will go to his phone, and he has to key in his personal income information. Then within 10 minutes through our apps, you will receive minimum 17 banks offer loan package, either approved and approved at how much? 10 minutes. Where you used to need few days, now you only need 10 minutes with this particular apps. Okay, these are some of the things that MIEA is doing to make ourselves, to ride on technology to make ourselves better. And of course, during MCO, we actually launched MIEA MLS. MLS is not a new thing over in US and Canada. I know that, but it is a fantastic thing. But the thing is, outside US is actually not so as easy to practice to do the MIA, the MLS, because we don't, the exclusive listing is an issue. We don't have as much exclusive listing. As of now, from our survey, it's about 20% in Malaysia. So we have decided to still go ahead with the 20%. All right. So MLS is this B2B platform, which is something that we think is going to be very effective. We started in last month. We launched this in last month during a lockdown period, and they already has some transaction, which is fantastic. And also we are partnering out with one of the biggest insurance broker in ASEAN to come out with an app called MIEA Insure. So this will actually come out with a long series of property-related insurance, which involve the professional indemnity insurance, the property rental guarantee insurance, and things like that, right? And then we actually take it to the next level on this MIEA Insure, where in Malaysia,
Did he freeze up on you, Brian, too? Yeah.
It's frozen for me too.
the individual. So we actually allow individual to cover themselves at a very, very
Oh, his reception must be bad.
Could be the axis, the world's turning. He's in Malaysia, right?
Yeah.
So the world's turning. Just kidding.
Mr. Ping, can you hear us?
Mr. Ping, can you hear? We've got a little bit of screen freeze here.
He's gone. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I know that I had a difficulty and I had to log back in.
There he is.
Are you back in with us, sir?
Okay. Oh, so there is a time limit at 8 o'clock. Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, you're fine. I think we just
He just froze
saw
up a
where
little bit.
there's a little technical freeze on the screen. That's all.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
we weren't cutting you off.
you weren't- no.
I was thinking, hey, what happened? Am I talking for too long?
So I'm sorry if you wanted to continue your thought there.
Okay, I'm actually finishing. So we are also, basically we want to become the technical center for all the Malaysian real estate practitioner. And we are also following the bringing in the Australian model to start doing, introducing private auction into Malaysian property market, which we feel it will be we will introduce a very good option for the agents and the owners to think, yeah? So for those who would like to know more,
Uh-oh.
okay, can I answer that, Laura? Hello? Oops.
I would say yes.
Oh, all right. Okay. Now, for MIEA, MLS is about property listing. Properties, those are for sale or for rent. For MIEA agent data, that is actually for transacted data only. Yeah, that's the main difference between the two.
Sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty too. So forgive me, I blocked out there, but I did have a question for you. I know that I think Laura's going to come back on, and if there were other questions, we want to make sure that those were answered as well. Just wanted to find out from your vantage point, those that are investing in Malaysia,
Yes.
are they coming for business? Are they, is it more of a vacation home? Saying, in what countries are you seeing the most buyers into Malaysia?
According to our statistic, I think the highest foreign ownership now is from China.
Okay.
I think which is probably the same as everywhere else in the world. So, notice that I actually talk about Malaysian, my second home just now. That
Yes.
was actually originated from what we previously called a silver hair program. So the spirit of that, even though the name has changed and the age limit has already also changed, but the spirit behind that particular system is the same, which we are actually promoting Malaysia to other country as a destination of retirement. I think that is one way of you to look at it. Actually, Malaysia, I have given a talk in Tokyo in one real estate convention last year, which is done by NAR. Apparently, when I was there in Tokyo, I was told by the participants in Tokyo that Malaysia is their top 5. Malaysia is their top 5 retirement destination for Japanese. Yeah, so that is something very interesting.
Right, very good. So yeah, I see where the affordability is definitely there, as you were pointing out, compared to other countries where someone might want to invest. Are you seeing then, if you've got retirement homes, are they also seeing short-term rentals, what we would call Airbnbs or other types of investments like that?
As a matter of fact, Airbnb is one of the hype right now. I will call it a hype because I think in the region, Airbnb in ASEAN region alone, Airbnb industry in Malaysia actually increases by 70% year on year, 70% for the past 2-3 years. So there are people buying for the purpose of doing short-term stay, investment on this. And but of course, Airbnb is really badly hit because of the travel ban. Yeah, people can't go in. Everyone is relying on the local tourists right now, which many Airbnb owners are really suffering right now.
Mm.
I saw Sharon Wu is asking question here. Can you give us example for the transaction data in agent data that is not in MLS? Now, our MLS system may not look exactly the same as the one in US or Canada, but actually the developer, the service provider we use for our MLS is actually a listed company from Canada. Yeah, it's actually a listed company from Canada. So here it says, Sharon Wu say, here in US, we use the cap rate to indicate the return for the investment property. What is the cap rate you see in Malaysia right now? Now, the cap rate really differ from properties to properties, but we don't use cap rate very often on residential property. I mean, I am a valuer myself. We use cap rate on commercial property and industrial property, meaning usually we use it on income generating properties, such as industrial and commercial. But when it comes to residential property, I still can give you a rough figure. Probably you are looking at somewhere around 4-5%, some maybe slightly higher. Okay, 4 or 5% return on your investment on your cap rate. But do not forget, I have actually shown you a 29 years old graph that tells you that Malaysia property is going through a very steadily growth over the past 30 years. So in property, besides rental income, you also have this thing called capital appreciation. So if you add the two together, you should be looking at capital appreciation of probably average about 5% at least over 1 year. Yeah, of course, it fluctuates over in the short-term interval, but long-term wise, you're looking at least 5% on your capital gain, plus another 4 to 5% on the rental.
Laura, did you have, I think it was mentioned that Yami might have had a question in the middle of his presentation.
I didn't see any questions come through other than what Sharon wrote.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, I hope I present Malaysia clear enough.
You did a fantastic job.
You did great.
Thank you.
Really, we
Yeah.
appreciate your patience.
That was
And of course, it's a long time to wait for a third position, but more than worth
No
the
worries.
wait.
My pleasure.
We look forward to building on our relationship with you, and hopefully in the coming months, we have more of these conversations and
Sure.
can do that. And of course,
Yeah, and if you need anything from us, just let us know. We're glad to help you out as well.
exactly.
Sure, of course. Thank you very much.
You're good.
Thanks
I
for having me.
feel like, at least with the shade that's come into my house, I look like I have a sunburn, So anyways, hey, I just wanted to thank you all for attending today. We hope that you got great value out of our three terrific speakers. Thank you for our panelists for being here. And of course, just look forward to the next event. I think we're talking about, was it September or October that we may be doing the
It's
next?
actually November.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so looking for something great then. But till then, we hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And again, thank you to everybody for attending.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.